Before we begin tonight's story, let's take just a moment to settle in. You don't need to try to fall asleep. There's nothing to achieve, no pressure, no rush. Just let yourself rest exactly as you are. You're safe here. You're held, and you are not alone. So many hearts are quietly carrying things they don't speak of. And tonight, this story is for all of us. Let your body soften, even just a little. Let your thoughts wander gently. And if your mind wanders off, that's okay. Let it. That's part of the magic. You don't have to listen too hard or stay too focused. Just let the words wrap around you like a favorite blanket and drift through the story world at your own pace. Even just listening, even just resting is enough. It's more than enough. So get cozy, take a breath, and another breath. Longer now. Softer. Slower. And when you're ready, we'll begin the story together. Once upon a soft and distant time, in a land where the clouds moved like slow swaying lullabies, there lived a young prince. Nestled within the velvet walls of a grand castle, everything his heart wished for he had. Silken cloaks, golden cakes, music boxes that played lullabies with a sigh, and windows that caught the pink of every morning light. But oh, he had never learned how to be soft, how to be still, how to listen to the way the trees hum when no one is watching. He had grown a bit sharp at the edges, like a glass that had never held warm tea. One twilight, not morning, not night, a gentle knock echoed from the castle gates. The sky was draped in the color of dreams. Just before they formed, a woman appeared, cloaked in night and offering a single sleepy red rose. Her voice, barely a whisper, asked for shelter only for the space of one starry night. But the prince, confused by the wornness of her cloak, the wild curl of her hair, the tired shimmer in her eyes, could not see the quiet magic resting in her outstretched hand. He turned her away. Ah, but things are not always what they seem when the moon is high and the night is soft. As she turned, her shape shimmered, flickered, and slowly blossomed into a radiant enchantress, wrapped in starlight and silence. The prince, startled, tried to undo what had already unfolded, but the enchantress had seen the shadow behind his eyes. The way his heart had forgotten how to hold love gently, and so, with a sigh like wind through lavender, she cast a spell. not out of anger, no, but out of quiet sorrow. The castle fell into a hush. Time seemed to curl up like a cat by the fire. The prince became a beast, not cruel, not monstrous, but cloaked in fur and forgotten softness. The walls whispered now, the mirrors shimmered, the clocks slowed. She left behind two things: a magic mirror, always clear, always showing the world outside, like a dream floating on the surface of a still lake, and the enchanted rose, that glowing, slumbering rose. Its petals would fall slowly like feathers in a snow glow. And if the beast could truly learn to love and be loved in return, before the last petal kissed the earth, the spell would break, like morning breaking gently over the hills. And if not, then the castle would sleep forever, tucked between the pages of a dream that never ends. But hush now, there is no rush. Let the petals fall as they may. Let your thoughts tumble like ribbons through clouds. Think of soft things, like warm bread, a cat's purr, the way sunlight feels through lace curtains, a field of bluebells where nothing hurts. And if your mind starts to wander, let it, to kitchen windows fogged by steam, to books left half open, to wind chimes swaying over porches where no one needs anything from you. Let one thought become another, become another. Apples become pillows, pillows become clouds, clouds become stars. This is how dreams begin. The rose is still blooming, the castle is still, and somewhere, not far from here, love is learning how to bloom again. Not too far from here, if you close your eyes, just enough to blur the edges, you'll find a little village tucked gently into the folds of the French countryside. It's the kind of place where rooftops lean into each other like old friends, where bakeries hum with cinnamon warmth, and every morning begins the same, until it doesn't. Most of the people live simple, soft, familiar lives, braiding bread, stitching hems, opening shutters with yawns still clinging to their lips. But among them walk two souls, a little different, a little brighter maybe, or just turned in another direction. Belle, lovely as a spring morning wrapped in a book cover, with thoughts that drift through stories and pages rather than gossip and gardens. And her father, Maurice, a kindly inventor with wild ideas. Wild ideas that hum and clatter and puff along beside him like little loyal clouds. The townspeople, bless them, don't quite understand. They tilt their heads, murmur things behind cups of tea and baskets of eggs. But Belle, she walks on. She reads. She dreams. She sings to the sky and forgets to be ordinary. They call her peculiar. But perhaps peculiar is just another word for a star. And then there's Gaston, all broad smiles and bravado, puffed up pride like a rooster in a mirror. He's decided Belle will be his bride, not because he knows her heart, but because she's beautiful, and he's decided that's enough. He struts, he schemes, he sends his silly little shadow, Le Fou, to prepare for a wedding that only exists in his mind. Belle, graceful as a sigh, dodges him easily, like a leaf in a stream, and returns home, where her father is tinkering with something that sparks and spins. Are we odd? She wonders aloud, and the question floats in the warm air. Maurice, without missing a beat, smiles through the gears and wires. No, not odd, special, and we have each other. Sometimes that's the only answer that matters. She gives him a scarf, soft and woolen and woven with love. He tucks it close, like a charm, and heads out into the world. To a fair, to share his invention, to chase a little dream. He hums as he goes, the tune light and full of hope. But as the path winds, the forest thickens. The trees begin to lean in, whispering in creaky wooden voices. The sky turns the color of old ink. Wolves, shadows with eyes, stir among the leaves. The air grows colder. Maurice runs. Faster, faster. His scarf snagged on a branch. His invention left behind, forgotten by the wind. And just when the howling begins to echo behind him, there it is, a castle, dark, towering, forgotten by time, but somehow waiting. He pounds on the great door with trembling hands, seeking warmth, safety, a pause in the night. And as you drift further now into velvet dreams and quiet magic, you might wonder what's behind that door. But not now. Now you are warm. You are safe. You are wrapped in your own quiet story, and the night is long and kind. Let your thoughts tumble gently from castles to teacups, from roses to lullabies, from wolves to warm wool scarves. No need to chase the story. It'll wait for you. Sleep is here, just beside the fireplace. The forest is behind you. The dream continues when you're ready. So there was Maurice, dear Maurice. Lost scarf, tired boots, breath quick as bird wings. Standing just inside a castle that seemed to stretch and sigh around him. Like it, too, had been sleeping for a very long time. The air was still, like the moment before snow falls, and yet something in the stillness shimmered. The walls, wide and echoing, were not quite empty. They were listening. And then a flicker. Candles lit themselves, one by one, like stars waking up. A candelabra, golden, glowing, and utterly alive, twirled into view. Lumiere, he called himself, with a voice like warm velvet and a grin that sparkled. He was charming in a way that felt like a forgotten melody from a ballroom long ago. With a theatrical bow, he welcomed Maurice as though he were an honored guest and not a trembling stranger in a shadowed hall. Before Maurice could even respond, a second voice chimed in, this one precise, clipped, a little flustered. Cogsworth, a dignified little mantle clock with twirling hands and a twitch of nervousness in every tick. Then, with the gentlest of rattles, came Mrs. Potts. A teapot, yes, but with a warmth that could soothe even the most uncertain of hearts. She tottered forward with the most motherly of smiles, and her spout nearly sang with comfort as she offered a spot of tea. Maurice blinked. He looked at Lumiere, then Cogsworth, then the teapot, and you might think he'd scream or stumble or run, but instead something in his heart tilted, as if a part of him, the part that made strange little inventions from scraps and stars, wasn't all that surprised. Magic, he whispered to himself. Yes, magic. The quiet living kind. The kind that hums in chandeliers and hides in paintings. The kind that waits and hopes to be seen. The enchanted objects fussed over him, trying to make him comfortable while whispering amongst themselves. Because although they were kind, they were also careful. Their master, the beast, was unpredictable and terribly lonely. But alas, before Maurice could take another sip, before Mrs. Potts could pour another drop of honey-sweet tea, there was a sound like thunder wrapped in fur. The beast. He came crashing into the room like a storm. Not cruel exactly, but sorrowful in a way that made his anger sharp. Not monstrous, just cloaked in shadows and hurt, and the echo of years gone silent. His voice boomed, a roar, not of rage, but of fear wrapped in armor. Who are you? Why are you here? Did you come to stare? Maurice, poor soul, stumbled backward, tripping over his own words, his scarf long forgotten in the forest. He tried to explain, to say it was an accident, that he was cold, that the wolves, that he meant no harm. But the beast, wounded and walled off by years of silence and spells, could not hear apologies, only echoes, only the thud of old fears, and with a final roar that shook the chandeliers, he locked Maurice in the dungeon, down where the stone floors remember sadness, and the wind whistles lullabies through the bars. But this is not where the story ends, not even close, because elsewhere in that quiet little village, with the bookshop and the baker, a girl is dreaming of adventure, and the enchanted rose still glows in its glass chamber, petals drifting down like seconds in a snow globe, softly, slowly, a lot like your thoughts, falling gently, one by one, into stillness, into rest, into the velvet quiet where stories bloom, and nothing needs to be fixed, only felt. You are safe. The castle doors are closed. The night is warm. Let your mind wander to candlelit halls, ticking clocks, cups of tea, and windows with moonlight on the sill. Sleep is coming like a key turning softly into a lock, and soon Belle will come home. But for now, just breathe. Just drift. Drift back in the village, the one with singing bread and tulip-lined windows. The day had taken on a kind of theatrical flair. Something was being prepared, or perhaps performed. Outside Belle's little cottage, the one where ivy climbs like poetry and books are always open, a small crowd had gathered like curious clouds around a curious event. Gaston, all puffed up pride and polished boots, was assembling what he called a wedding party, though it looked more like a parade of mirrors, all aimed at himself. He had practiced his smile, fluffed his collar, and was quite sure, certain in fact, that Belle would swoon at the future he'd painted for her. A house full of antlers, suns as thick as logs, a fireplace roaring, and Gaston in every chair, on every wall, in every word. A life not of partnership, but of possession. And Belle, oh Belle, she stood in the doorway, polite but distant, like a swan in a pond too small. Her eyes drifted as he spoke, not out of rudeness, but because her heart was already far away, off chasing wind-blown pages, or mapping the stars behind the daylight sky. He ended his proposal with a flourish, a puffed chest, and the sort of grin that thought he had already won. But Belle simply smiled, softly, kindly, and said, "No." Not unkindly, not cruelly, but with a sort of calm that feels like an unopened book, waiting for the right story. Then she turned and stepped into her cottage, like someone closing the last page of a tale that didn't belong to her. Gaston blinked. The audience, his so-called wedding party, blinked too. And though he laughed, and straightened his coat. Inside him, something stormed. Rejection isn't something Gaston had ever practiced, so he stomped away, humiliated, but determined, like thunder that hadn't quite decided where to go. Inside, Belle stood still, the quiet of her little home wrapping around her like a quilt. She looked out the window, watched the villagers return to their lives, their loops, their lullabies of routine, and she felt that same old ache, that soft, persistent longing for something more. Not grand, not loud, just real. Something that felt like belonging and becoming all at once. And just as that ache was unfurling in her chest again, there came a knock. Small, silly, sheepish. It was LeFou. Only now he was wearing something she recognized. Her father's scarf. The very one she had tied with her own hands. And suddenly the world tilted. "Where did you find that?" she asked, her voice a flutter of panic and purpose. LeFou stammered, fidgeted, explained something about the crossroads, about wolves, about how the scarf had been abandoned in the woods. And that was all she needed to hear. She didn't wait. She didn't pack. She didn't plan. She was gone in an instant, racing beneath the trees that whispered secrets overhead, following only the pull of her heart. Because when someone you love is missing, you don't wait for permission. You follow the thread, through branches and brambles, through breath and belief. And now the forest begins again, its trees sighing lullabies, its shadows curling like sleepy cats. And you too may follow, but only in your dreams. You don't need to run. You are warm, wrapped in your own story now. Let your thoughts float like scarves in the wind, through fields, through cottages, through the hush of nighttime roads. Let them wander, from teacups to candelabras, to doorways, to stardust, to the feeling of being brave and kind at the same time. Sleep is waiting in the woods, quiet, gentle, unafraid. Let the forest carry you. Let your heart be still. Belle is on her way, and everything is unfolding, just as it should. The wind had begun to sing, low and uncertain, as Belle hurried through the forest, her cloak tugged by branches, her thoughts scattered like petals in a storm. She followed only one thread, her father's scarf, his voice, his absence. That thread tugged her heart forward, until suddenly the trees parted, and the castle rose before her. It loomed quiet and strange, a palace forgotten by time, its spires brushing clouds like fingers searching for softness. The gate creaked as she stepped inside, into a place where echoes remembered joy and shadows waited for change. Inside, the castle was all hush and hush and hush, stone and velvet, golden halls wrapped in cobwebs, mirrors with memories, staircases that sighed beneath her feet. Somewhere, deep inside, a pair of enchanted friends were whispering. Lumiere, still glowing, still grand, and Cogsworth, ticking a little slower these days. They watched as the petals of the enchanted rose fell ever so faintly, like feathers drifting through silence. With every petal, they lost a little more of themselves, their voices softer, their shapes stranger, memories like lace unraveling. But then they saw her, Belle, a girl unlike any other, eyes full of questions and stars, heart lit with something they remembered, hope. And just like that, the wind changed. Belle wandered through the quiet maze of hallways, calling for her father, and the castle listened. Down, down, deeper still, she found him in a cold, forgotten cell. Maurice, pale and shivering, his voice faint, a flickering match. He tried to warn her, tried to push her away, told her of the beast, the danger, the spell, but it was too late. The beast appeared, all fury and sorrow stitched together, with fur and grief. Belle stood between them, small but steady, her voice calm, though her heart raced like wings behind her ribs. "Let him go," she said. "I'll stay." And time, for just a moment, held its breath. The beast did not smile. He did not thank her. He simply agreed with a nod that sounded like thunder and turned away. Maurice cried out, tried to reach for her, but she was already led away, and he was already gone. No goodbye, just echoes, just silence. Lumiere, ever the romantic, suggested she be given a proper room, not the cold dungeon where dreams go to freeze. The beast agreed, barely, and brought her to a room high in the castle, with windows that touched the sky and walls that remembered laughter. But he warned her, stern and strange, never go to the west wing. Then he left her, the door closing with a final thud, like a heartbeat locking itself away. Bella stood in her new cage, her mind spinning. The world she knew had vanished, and now this strange, impossible place was all that remained. She looked out the window, into a forest she couldn't escape, and wondered, softly, achingly, is this home? Tears swelled, not loudly, just enough to blur the edges. Then came a knock, not from a guard, not from a monster, but from a teapot. Mrs. Potts, sweet, maternal, gently rattling with kindness, she offered tea, honeyed, warm, the kind that reaches deep into your chest and reminds you that kindness still exists. Belle blinked and nodded, but just as she turned, she crashed into something big puffy, musical. Madame Grande, a wardrobe so full of drama and delight, she practically sang herself into the room. Together, they fluttered and fussed, trying to coax Belle downstairs, trying to convince her perhaps the beast isn't so terrible. Perhaps dinner wouldn't hurt. But Belle, heart still aching, voice so small, said no, not yet. The room hushed again. She stood alone by the firelight, mourning not only her father, but the freedom she had folded and tucked away like a letter she might never send. And somewhere beyond the curtains, a rose sighed. But for now, let that thought drift. Let Belle rest in the soft chair by the fire. Let the teapot's steam curl through your dreams. You are not in a dungeon. You are safe. You are held. Let your thoughts fall gently now from velvet halls to ticking clocks, from moonlit towers to singing wardrobes. Let the castle quiet your mind. Let the tea and kindness be enough. Home is not always a place. Sometimes it's a feeling, and you are already there. Back in the little village, the one where life loops like a song you've known forever, the tavern was glowing with candlelight and clinking mugs. A place where stories were told and egos puffed like freshly baked bread. But tonight the air was heavier because Gaston, proud, polished, and very much used to winning, was sulking. He slumped in a chair carved with antlers, staring into his drink like it betrayed him. Around him, laughter danced, but he didn't hear it. Only the echo of Belle's voice, soft but firm. No. He didn't understand. He couldn't. And so LeFou, ever the jester, ever the loyal shadow, called on the villagers to cheer him up. They sang, they clapped, they stomped their boots. They reminded him how admired he was, how strong, how admired, how loved Gaston truly was. And slowly, like a pot heating over fire, his confidence returned. He laughed, he flexed, he stomped back. Pride, after all, is very easy to inflate. But then, just as the room swelled with song and swagger, the tavern doors flew open, and in stumbled Maurice. Wind-blown, frantic, wild-eyed with worry. He pled, begged, spoke of a castle, a curse, a terrible beast, of his daughter taken, of danger that lurked in forgotten towers. But the room, all warmth and drink and noisy joy, fell quiet. Then laughter, not kind laughter, not curious laughter, the kind that closes doors. Crazy old Maurice, someone mumbled. They pushed him out into the cold night. The merriment resumed, but not for Gaston. Because in that rambling story, in that desperation, he heard not madness, but opportunity. He leaned close to LeFou, a glint in his eye, not of joy or love, but of strategy. If Belle would not choose him freely, perhaps she could be cornered. A plan began to take shape, dark and quiet, like clouds gathering behind a smile. Threaten Maurice, have him locked away, called mad, called unstable, unless Belle agreed to marry Gaston. Yes, it was clever and cruel. But Gaston was no longer wounded. He was plotting. Outside, the wind began to pick up, carrying Maurice's voice into the woods. Help me. Help my daughter. But the village windows stayed shut, and the stars silent. Back in the castle, deep in its halls of whispering chandeliers and forgotten light, the beast was pacing. Pacing, fidgeting, fretting, because tonight he had hope. And hope for someone who had worn shadows for so long was a strange and fragile thing. The enchanted servants did their best, smoothing his fur, brushing his cloak, giving advice that felt like raindrops on thunder. Be gentle, Lumiere said with a flourish. Be punctual, huffed Cogsworth with a tick. Be charming, whispered Mrs. Potts, always the softest of the bunch. And the beast tried. Dinner was prepared, golden and glowing, warm with spices and candlelight. The table waited, hoping to feel like home. The servants crossed their fingers and their silverware. But when the call came, she will not come. A silence fell, and then a growl, low, slow, rising like a storm inside a chest too small to hold it. The beast, all tangled fury and aching heart, stormed up the stairs, feet like drums on marble, to the door behind which Belle waited in quiet defiance. He growled, he demanded, he told her to join him, now, at once, to obey. But Belle, oh brave Belle, she said no, not cruelly, not fearfully, just clearly and calmly. And that was something the beast did not know how to face. So he threatened, if you don't eat with me, you don't eat at all. He slammed the door, the sound of it echoing like a cry into the furthest corners of the castle. He retreated, not to the dining room, not to the warmth, but to the west wing, where secrets slept beneath dust and glass. There in the shadows, he turned to his mirror. Not an ordinary one, but one enchanted with the power to see far places and hidden truths. He watched her, watched Belle speak with the enchanted wardrobe, saw her heart, heard her words. I don't want anything to do with him. The words pierced like horns, and the beast, once a prince, now more echo than man, began to crumble inside. How long must this go on? He asked no one, a question spoken into darkness. His reflection held no answers. Meanwhile, Belle's stomach gave a quiet little sigh. She was hungry, not just for food, but for something kind, something grounding. So, quietly, softly, she tiptoed from her room, down hallways that hummed with magic, until she found her way to the kitchen. Mrs. Potts welcomed her like an old friend. Cogsworth protested, fretted some more. But Lumiere, bless him, had other plans. If we're going to break the rules, he said with a sparkle, we might as well do it with flair. And then the lights, the music, the wonder. Be our guest, they sang. Dishes twirling, napkins dancing, a chandelier spinning like a galaxy in celebration. Belle laughed, really laughed, and the castle lit up like it hadn't in years. For just a little while, there was no curse, no beast, no locked doors, only joy, only magic. Afterward, Belle asked to see more. So, the enchanted objects, now glowing with hope, led her through the castle, telling stories of happier times, of love and music, of starlit dances and rooms that once held their dreams. But Belle, curious, clever, quietly bold, slipped away. She followed a feeling, a hush, a mystery, to the west wing. There, behind a velvet curtain, she found a room not meant for her, a place frozen in sorrow and memory, shattered portraits, petals beneath glass, the enchanted rose. She stepped closer. It glowed, not with danger, but with something almost like sadness. Her hand reached out, not to harm, but to understand. And just then, the beast roared, wild with fear and fury. He caught her there. "Get out," he bellowed. Not because he hated her, but because he feared he had already lost everything, and he couldn't bear to lose her too. Belle ran. She ran through hallways, downstairs, past candlelight and clocks that called her name. She fled the castle, into the forest, into the dark, and the beast was alone again. He had roared at the only person who had looked at him with something other than fear. And now she was gone. He sank to the floor beside the rose, watching another petal fall, soft as breath, final as silence. "If I can't love her," he whispered. And the castle once again wept with him. "But you do not need to weep. You are safe here, in candlelight and covers, wrapped in stories. Let your thoughts soften now, like petals, like lullabies, like forgotten things remembering how to bloom." Belle ran. Branches pulled at her cloak. Moonlight blinked beneath the trees, and her heart beat like wild hooves beneath her ribs. The forest had turned wild, sharp and cold and full of shadows. And from those shadows came the wolves. Not storybook wolves. Not the kind that wear disguises or knock politely, but snarling, glowing-eyed creatures with sharp teeth, sharp as frost and hunger deep as the night. They circled, they leapt, and Belle, brave, brilliant Belle, stood her ground as best as she could, until suddenly, with a thunderclap of fury and fur, the beast. He appeared like a storm made flesh, roaring and crashing into the circle of wolves, tearing them away from her, fighting not just for her life, but for something he didn't quite know how to name yet. They scattered, but not before they left their mark. The beast collapsed, wounded and breathing heavy, snow painting itself across his fur and her shaking hands. Belle could have run. No one would have blamed her. The path was open, and freedom whispered from the hills. But she turned. Kneeling beside him, she pressed a hand to his chest. "You're hurt." He didn't answer. And so, with strength borrowed from love she hadn't yet understood, she helped him to his feet and led him, slow step by slow step, back to the castle. The snow felt like feathers. The night held its breath. Inside, the fire was waiting. She cleaned his wounds. He crumbled, complained, bared his teeth. But her touch was careful, kind, not afraid. And as they looked at each other, truly looked, they saw something unexpected. Not perfection, not magic, but someone else, also learning, also lost, also trying. "I was rude," he murmured. "I was stubborn," she replied. And in that moment, something began to shift, a stone bridge forming between two lonely hearts. Elsewhere in the castle, Lumiere's eyes lit with delight. Cogsworth polished himself nervously. Mrs. Potts gave a knowing little sigh. "Something's changing," they whispered. "Something more." And so they schemed, kindly, quietly, ways to help their master open his heart even wider. The beast, pondering her kindness, remembered something she once said, something about books, about how stories gave her hope and helped her see beyond small towns and small minds. So he brought her there, to the forgotten library. Towering shelves, dusty volumes, sunlight filtering through tall windows like blessings. "It's yours," he said, awkward and uncertain. Belle gasped, the kind of sound joy makes when it's surprised, and she smiled in a way that could melt the coldest winter. They chose a book together, King Arthur, a tale of courage, of destiny, of kings pulled from stone. But when she handed it to him, the beast hesitated. "I never learned to read," he confessed. And Belle, instead of laughing or turning away, she sat beside him. She opened the book and read aloud. And as the words danced from her lips, he listened, really listened. Each word a lantern, each sentence a hand held. For the first time, the beast realized that books could quiet the loneliness, that stories could open doors, and that someone gentle and full of light, was choosing to stay beside him. That evening, Belle smiled again. "I'd like to start over," she said softly. "Would you join me for dinner?" The beast blinked. His heart, wherever it was now, beat a little faster. Yes. Somewhere in the shadows, the enchanted servants wept with joy. "Human again," they sang in whispers. "Maybe, just maybe." Meanwhile, far away from kindness and candlelight, plans of a darker kind were being made. Gaston and LeFou crept through town to meet a man named Diarc, a man that slithered and lingered like a chill along the back of the neck. He ran the asylum. He dealt in locks and labels, in threats that wore clean gloves. Gaston smiled. He explained his plan, twisted, clever, cruel. Force Belle to marry him, or watch her beloved father locked away as mad. Monsieur Diarc, ever fond of mischief, draped in civility, nodded. He would help, and so the three of them toasted their shadows, sang their cruel little song, and planned to twist love into a trap. But that part of the story is not yours to hold. Instead, return to the warm hallways of the castles, to fires lit with hope, to a library full of quiet wonder. Let your mind wander through the bookshelves, through the flicker of candlelight, through pages turning like dreams in the dark. You are safe. You are home. The beast is learning. Belle is reading. The rose is glowing. In the west wing, where secrets had once curled in corners, there was now light. Lumiere fluffed the beast's cravat with dramatic flair. Cogsworth fussed with buttons that hadn't been touched in years, and the beast paced. He looked into the mirror, not the magic one, but a regular one, and asked quietly, "What if she doesn't feel the same?" His heart was full and still afraid. The servants, gentle in their way, urged him onward. "Just be yourself. Speak from your heart," said Mrs. Potts with a smile like warm tea. And so the moment came. At the top of the grand staircase, Belle appeared, dressed in golden silk, glowing like a sunrise inside a dream. She descended slowly, like a star falling just for him. The beast watched her, silent, awestruck. She smiled, and together they dined, not in formality, not in pretense, but in the beginning of something tender. Then came the dance. The ballroom opened like a storybook, its chandeliers whispering to the stars beyond the glass. And as Mrs. Potts sang, low and clear, a tale as old as time, they moved together through the golden light, two souls circling the delicate hush of hope. But as the music softened, the beast noticed. Belle was distant. He asked gently, not to pry, but to understand. She told him the truth. "I'm worried about my father." Without hesitation, without fear of losing her, he brought her the enchanted mirror. "Look," he said. In the mirror, Maurice stumbled through the woods, searching, calling, lost. Belle gasped. "You must go to him," said the beast. He placed the mirror in her hands so she could always look back, so she could always find her way. And she left, with eyes full of tears and something more than gratitude. The castle dimmed in her absence. The servants, quietly watching, felt their hearts sink. The rose hung heavy with its final petal, but Mrs. Potts, eyes full of wisdom, whispered, "He let her go. That means he loves her." Too late, perhaps, or perhaps not. In the forest, Belle found her father. She wrapped him in her arms and whispered of kindness, of change, of a creature who wasn't a monster at all. Just as they reached home, a dark carriage rolled in. Monsieur d'Arc, with papers, with promises, with chains hidden behind politeness. Maurice was to be taken away, but Belle, brave and bright as ever, stood firm. She refused Gaston's offer. She refused to trade love for safety. And with a flash of memory, she held up her mirror. The beast. She showed the townspeople what lived in the forest. Not a monster, but something more human than any of them. And Gaston, wounded, prideful, hungry for control, saw her gaze, saw her care, and that was enough to ignite the fire. "Kill the beast," he shouted, and the mob rose. Torches, anger, noise. But Belle and Maurice, they ran back to the castle, to him. The battle began. Inside the castle walls, the enchanted servants came to life. Sofas bounced, clocks ticked defiantly, feather dusters flew through the air like dancing birds. They defended their home not with violence, but with cleverness, joy, and loyalty. Outside, Gaston crept higher, to the tower, to the beast. The beast, heartbroken, had not moved. He hadn't fought, hadn't run, until he saw her, Belle. She had come back, and in that single heartbeat, he found his will again. The battle between them was fierce. Rooftops and roars, thunder and betrayal. Gaston lied, stabbed, begged, twisted. But in the end, the beast had him, held him, and chose mercy. He let him go, but Gaston, poisoned by his own pride, struck one final time. A dagger, a fall, silence. The beast collapsed. Belle rushed to him. "I'm glad I got to see you," he said, and closed his eyes. Tears fell. Belle held him. "I love you," she whispered. And the rose, the final petal, fell. But something else fell too. Light. Warm and golden, it rose from the floor, from the windows, from the beast himself. He lifted from the ground, glowing, shifting, changing. Belle watched, breath caught between hope and disbelief. And then, eyes. His eyes. She knew them. And with trembling joy, she said, "It's you." The castle bloomed with life. The curse lifted. Lumiere, Cogsworth, Mrs. Potts, human again, laughing, hugging, dancing. Music returned. Magic turned into memory. And in the center of it all, Belle and the prince. No longer beast, no longer prisoner, but something new, something true. Hand in hand, heart to heart, they stepped into a world that was theirs to make. A tale not just finished, but just beginning. And the spell was broken, and the night was still. And now you may rest. You followed the whole story, and like all beautiful things, it ends, only to begin again in your dreams. Sleep well, dear dreamer. The castle is quiet. The roses are blooming, and you are safe. You are already home.